Welcome to the 67th installment of Ear to the Ground, the Land Stewardship Project's audio podcast on family farming, sustainable agriculture, local food systems, and local democracy. I'm Brian DeVore, editor of the Land Stewardship Letter. In episode 66, we talked to wildlife professional David Traba about the role grass-based farms can play in improving habitat for birds and providing ecological services in general. Such benefits are particularly important in rural areas that were formerly covered by ecological gems such as native prairies, which have all but disappeared from the Midwest. We interviewed Traba at Moonstone Farm, a western Minnesota operation that is integrating cattle production with natural resource protection, utilizing managed rotational grazing. Moonstone's owner-operators, Audrey Arner and Richard Handine, have also established tree plantings and other perennial plant systems such as wine grapes. The farmers sell their grass-fed beef directly to consumers and restaurants that are seeking a natural, great-tasting product that's good for the environment. On the day Traba and others toured Moonstone, it was clear this working farm was having a positive impact on the environment. Birds and other wildlife were thriving, and erosion was next to non-existent. A neighbor's remnant native prairie was proof that a working, sustainable farm like Arner and Handine's can exist side by side with an untouched landscape. But it was also clear that many ecological services were being created on the farm itself. After talking to Traba about the role working farms can play in the natural environment, I interviewed Audrey Arner about the steps she and Handine took to transition their farm from row crops to perennial plants, and how they are making such a system economically viable.
Like most of the farms in our area, this farm when we came here was all corn one year and all soybeans the next. And we did that same rotation and started certifying some of that organic in the late 1970s, and that was pretty difficult, not having any perennials in that rotation. And our first incentives to begin putting some perennials in the landscape were through the original RIM program, Reinvest in Minnesota, working with Pheasants Forever to get a cost share for seeding down highly erodible land that had been in corn and soybean production. And we've worked a lot with the Natural Resources Conservation Service with programs to improve the infrastructure of our farm to be able to perennialize and to diversify, which I regard as the lessons of the Great Prairie. We didn't really think about that when we were starting to make the transitions, but it's really what hits me powerfully now, retrospectively. I mean, we became better farmers as we became better birders and better monitors of what was going on in our environment. It made us more sensitive to fixing the ills of the landscape, and learning a lot from other farmers within Land Stewardship Project to use practices that would benefit wildlife and be able to sustain our pocketbooks, especially in light of having foregone some federal farm program payments that had been sustaining us up until that point. It's kind of hard to give up those checks, but what I was explaining to somebody on the tour today was that even though we have lots of diversity in the landscape and our woody plantings that are in timber and fruits and nuts and ornamentals and medicinals, their investment is very long-term, and it's only because of the long-term investment in cattle that we are able to, that we have generated enough capital to be able to do experiments, to be able to plant things that take 3 to 5 years to start bearing, like in the vineyard, or 10 to 20 years in the form of nut trees. So it's really the cattle that are the wealth generators that are enabling our experiments, but they're also the different life form that has spawned other diversity on the farm. You know, I think we have more different birds because we're grazing, because of the nature not only of more perennials in landscape, but having manure in the landscape and having big four-leggeds in the landscape, and it's altered and it's got a good feel to it. You know, that's one of the reasons we keep doing it. It's not less work, but it's different work, and it's different every day, and it's not butting our heads up against what I called it. Richard used to be wrestling with the heavy metal dinosaurs, you know, with equipment that was wearing out. And do we invest in bigger and better equipment and rent more land, or do we do something drastically different? And drastically different has been the best road for us.
Well, I think that's key that you talk about. It's more pleasurable for you. It's improved your quality of life, and it may not be less work, but it's a different kind of work that you find more satisfying. But all that wouldn't mean much if you couldn't make a living at it. And I guess we should point out, you guys have been able to get rewarded, especially since, like you said, the government commodity programs really deter farmers from doing this kind of thing. But you guys have, over the years, been able to build up a way of getting rewarded for that through the marketplace, through your marketing of your grass-fed products. That seems to have worked out. It seems to be a way that you're able to support then what you're doing on the land.
Yeah, if we were just taking trailer loads of cattle to the sale barn and taking whatever they'd give us for them, we'd be in deep trouble, I think, at this point. But because we set the price for our product and work with the community of restaurants and families who are amenable to believing what we say we need for our product and compensating us for it, there's a high trust level there and a high exchange of goodwill.
Just one other question, Audrey. One thing I was impressed with walking around the farm is how many times you and Richard talked about some of the relationships you have with neighbors. And I think that's pretty key. I mean, there's still, obviously you still have corn and soybean farms in this area, and that can, maybe some of the positive benefits you see for water quality can be wiped out by one rainstorm from a row crop field. But on the other hand, I was impressed with, you seem to have good relations with a lot of your neighbors, and that seems key if we're going to see this type of farming system benefit a community rather than just have islands of farms doing this kind of thing. In the end, that's probably not going to have a big overall impact, but if we can get more of the neighbors involved and doing their own version of some of the stuff that benefits the land, is that something you've seen change over the years a little bit? Or
what I've seen change over the years within our broader community, not only our immediate neighbors, but farmers who live a distance from us and people who live in town as well, is that we're not just an oddball rarity anymore. But we've been around for a long time, and people like the feel of our farming operation. They like the sense that you get walking around and experiencing the different species and watching for unique kinds of butterflies, and they like the food that comes from our farm. And that's something that commodity production isn't able to provide. It's kind of relationship that commodity production isn't able to provide, at least not that I'm aware of. So I'm not saying it's all around better, but it is different, and it's growing, and it's gotten to the point of respectability so that people are willing to try it. Our neighbor friend who owns the prairie that we visited on the tour this evening, I'm really just getting to know her, but I really want to feed her interest in the prairie and feed her interest in managing it as a means of maybe thinking that they might be interested in grazing a few cows on it, ours or theirs. I'm not set on putting our cows on there. I would just like to see livestock as part of how it's managed. Even though burning has been a good tool for restoring that prairie, I think grazing can bring great benefits to it as well.
For more information on Moonstone Farm, see www.prairiefair.com/moonstone. That's prairiefair, FARE.com/moonstone. For details on how farming systems can benefit natural habitat, see www.landstewardshipproject.org. Click on Programs and follow the links to the Multiple Benefits of Agriculture and Pasture-Raised Livestock page. If you have comments or suggestions about this podcast, contact Brian DeVore at bdevore@landstewardshipproject.org, or you can call 612-722-6377. Thanks to Laura Borgendale, a Western Minnesota musician, for Ear to the Ground's theme music. And a special thank you to all of Land Stewardship Project's members who make initiatives such as this podcast possible. If you're not a member, visit landstewardshipproject.org to learn how you can support LSP. Thanks for listening.